And thank you again for being here. So I think we can softly start while the rest of you join in. So thank you again. So we're here and welcome again to our webinar. Right, this webinar is being organized by the Bankit in partnership with Qorus. And today we're going to talk about our joint report titled Reshaping Banking, the Global Digital Banking Radar for 2023. Okay, so the purpose of this webinar is really to give a little highlight overview on this hopefully great piece of content that we are producing jointly, which will come out in May. Okay, so mid-May it's going to come out, and we're going to give a little more detail on that. And fortunately, and I'm very honored to have a great set of speakers with me here today. So first and foremost, we have Roberto Ferrari from Qorus. He's a digital reinvention community lead, and he's going to do a little introduction here for us in terms of the overall community and the report itself. Next, we have Renata Petrovic. She's from Banco Bradesco, and she's the head of innovation over at Bradesco. So great to have you, Renata. Khadija Ifat from Kuwait International Bank, a bank that is very near ebankIT, and she's the head of business excellence, leading retail digital transformation. We have Santiago de la Rea Tejul from Credit Andoja, the head of innovation and digital transformation. Massimo Condramoli from InfoNovus. He's a senior consultant there. He was previously with another ebankIT customer that was Hypocar Bank Lenzburg Bank in Switzerland. And last but not least, hopefully, me, Pedro Leite, and I'm the head of sales and partnerships here at ebankIT. So we have a great set of packed agenda here for us today. As you can see, we have, like I mentioned, an introduction that both Roberto and Renata are going to give us today on the overall community, which is a great asset, I would say, from Qorus in terms of exploring these topics, more specifically to this one that we're going to explore today, but also other ones. So please check that out. Then I'm going to give a quick overview on the key findings of the report. Okay, so report, as I mentioned, is coming out in May. So we are kind of teasing, pre-sharing some of the key insights that we already have. And then you can hopefully get curious about that and check that out, the full report that's coming out in the next few weeks. Okay, then I guess the most interesting part is really the lightning talks with the folks here that I mentioned just now. Okay, so we're gonna go through a set of roundtable questions and them really giving their expertise about the topic. Okay, I had the pleasure of interviewing some of them in the process of making this report, and I'm the first one that can vouch for the key insights and very interesting conversation that we're going to have today. And then we're going to have a little Q&A session in the end, so you can also chime in any questions or topics that we perhaps didn't cover that might be interesting for us to cover today. So this is a live session, so please feel free to chime in. So I guess I'll pass the word to Roberto, so he can then give us an introduction on the digital reinvention community at first, and then about the report itself.
Thank you, Pedro. Thank you very much. Hello, everyone. I'm really happy here to be here and helping out Pedro with the moderation of and giving you the welcome of this event. Just a couple of words, a couple of charts on Qorus communities and our own digital reinvention community, since this event is open to everyone. Just to tell you that this community is really centered around sharing of insights and knowledge and know-how. That's really the purpose of Qorus itself. So we decided in Qorus to create communities with people, like-minded people that can share the same passion and the same needs and the same interest into specific topics of their own jobs. So in this case, a specific case, we are talking about digital reinvention, which is a combination of digital transformation and innovation. So we bring together all those aspects, both in terms of short-term, or technology development from one side, and innovation and business development and transformation as well. So that's the idea of the community. The community is an international one, is very important now in terms of numbers, what we deliver in terms of content, people, and seminars and researches. If we go, to the next chart, the community already encompasses 180 different financial institutions from around the world. You can see they are coming from 60 different countries. It's made out of more than 300 members, 330 members. And as I was saying, we try to touch as much as possible different topics which are also suggested by the community members themselves that want to be interested into some specific aspects of what they are doing, and they want to understand better what's happening outside. So what's happening in other countries, in other regions, and having a broader view of what can really happen and can happen or will be happening in the future. So I think that's really the purpose of Qorus itself, and as I said, of the community. And thinking about that, we've decided, and I'm very happy that we did it with eBankIT, to create a global digital banking radar, which is the topic of today. And really, I'm very happy. Very happy that we made it together, really hand in hand with the team of Pedro. What's the purpose of this radar? Just to give you perspective, and then I'll leave it a little bit to Renata herself give her own perspective. Is the idea that, as I said, internationally there are different speeds, different practices, different status of development, of changes. So it's the idea of giving a sort of measurement, a sort of outlook of what's really happening in terms of digital transformation of financial institutions, and how this really is impacting at a broader level, which technologies, which business are changing, which business sides are changing, and so on. Very interesting research, I must say. And so I hope that with the friends of eBankIT, we could continue that also over the following years in order to really see the development across the time. But as I said, I wanted you to introduce you first of all, our chairman of our community, Renata Petrovic. She is the, as was mentioned before, head of Innovabra Habitat, which is basically the innovation hub of Bradesco and open banking of Bradesco. So she's our chairman. And Renata, I leave to you to give a little bit of introduction yourself of this research, and then we move on. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Roberto, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all of you that are with us today. It is a pleasure and an honor to be here, to be the chair of Qorus Digital Reinvention community. You know, collaboration has always been key to innovation, and that's, I think, what Qorus gives us the most, this network of experts in all fields and how we collaborate with each other. So we have lots in common, and we can learn from each other, and that's the main purpose of the community. So I really hope this session is both relevant and productive and fun to all of you. I believe we live in very challenging times, this post-COVID era. We've seen massive investments made in corporate innovation and digital transformation over the last 7 years or so, many billions of dollars spent on these themes. And we've seen mostly, you're going to see a lot from this eBank survey, but we know the main categories of those investments were made in digitization, with generally positive results in terms of customer adoption of digital itself, number of process digitized, volume of transactions flows through digital channels and tools. So we've seen a lot of positive evolution on that. We've also seen a lot of investments in fighting competitive threats, with their mixed results in terms of, preparing banks, incumbents to hold share, to hold market share. We all know how we feel about that. We also seeing lots of investments in VC investments in fintechs lately, which, you know, was kind of flat. But we also, I think one positive, very positive things that we've seen is investments in people, processes, and culture. Although retention for us is still a big challenge, I think we evolved a lot in terms of processes, implementing agile, implementing modular technologies, open banking. In terms of culture, we've seen a lot of evolution in that as well. However, I believe a lot has happened in the recent 2 years in the world that it is impacting corporate innovation and digital transformation scenario. So we've seen energy crisis, rising inflation and interest rates, geopolitical instability, the bursting of bubbles in the tech sector, digital currencies and fintech bubbles bursting. We've seen the collapse of the Silicon Valley Bank, the mecca, the engine behind fintech and startup innovation globally. So looking at all of that, that indicates that we are in a path for change. We need to rethink our approach to corporate innovation and digital transformation. From our side, we've been tasked to monetize investments made to date. We have been tasked to speed up go-to-market initiatives, to replace open innovation with more focused exploration of strategic themes, and mainly to implement sustainable business practices. So with that in mind, I believe the discussion here and the presentation of the survey will help us to address some of these thoughts, generate insights, and hopefully will show us some ways, some paths and directions to take from now on. So I'm very happy to be here. I'm happy to learn from you and discuss where we're going from now. Okay, so I will pass on to Pedro, who will present the study, and then we'll be here to discuss and to take questions, and again, to share and learn from each other. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Just one little thing. Operationally, it's this session is being recorded for everyone, just to know, and you'll get the recording, the link, and you will find the recording on our website and our Qorus website. And as a second thing, if you want to have put some questions, there is a chat at the bottom of the screen. You can use that one, or the Q&A as well, and that will be moderated as well. So Pedro, I leave it to you. As Renata was saying, rightly so, there are a lot of insights here that can help us to give you a perspective and get some helpful insights on what you are doing. Pedro, it's all yours.
Thank you. Thank you, Roberto. Thank you, Renata, for that great intro. You said it well, right? This is really about, finding those patterns inside of the feedback that the community gave us, right? That is the prime indicator here, and it's really about, I guess you put it very well in terms of what is the ultimate goal of the report is really, to identify those patterns and to have, and hopefully will be a help in terms of identifying what is that path to change or off change, right? Depending on how we look at it. Okay. So from the report itself, so, like Roberto and Renata mentioned, the report itself, we organized it's in these 4 pillars. Okay, so feeding the report itself, there is a survey that I'll give a little insight on the KPIs of that survey in the end. It will also be, you know, featured in the report itself, of course, but mainly this survey is feeding and it's helping us identify these patterns of insight that was constructed. Our approach was following these 4 pillars. Okay, so the first one is really what we call the new digital, right? So it's really looking at, and this has already been, you know, of course, widely discussed, but it's always important to make it substantial in terms of KPIs and data. That is, you know, what are the actual ripple effects of the pandemic in this, let's call it, in the digital banking landscape, or in the journey itself for each institution, right? Definitely, we're going to see some expected insights there, and some, you know, that might be as well. Then the second part is really all about what we call embracing digitalization. This is really about, you know, that path of change. You know, how do institutions, you know, banks, credit unions, all sorts of institutions look themselves and put themselves into their evaluate their maturity into their digital journey. Okay, and this, of course, takes in a lot of consideration on this ripple effect, right? The pandemic has brought into not only the digital, but, you know, overall the economy, right? If we look at what's happening right now, you know, these are still, you know, the waves that were initiated with this disruption that the pandemic has brought globally. Okay, the third part is really then all about how in this digital journey, where are the key focuses in terms of engaging with the customers, right? So the whole gambit is, as we move into this, let's call it anonymous digital modernization, where the expectation is I'm not going to a branch, or I'll go much less than I would go 20 or 30 years ago. But how do I as a client engage with the institution, and how the institution can really take care of me, while we have a very, you know, by default, or the expectation is that by default it is going to be a very unpersonalized interaction, right? So it's really all about how can we, if the patterns are pointing in the direction of personalization or not. And then finally is really, I guess, where the name of the report comes, right? So it's really all about looking forward, right? So it's that flywheel of innovation that we all know from the literature in terms of being adapted into the institutions. How can they create a flywheel first, and second is how can they keep it moving, and where do we show up next, right? Because there are a lot of trends, there are a lot of buzzwords out there. It's really important to just, you know, have a light that, you know, goes through the noise, and really, you know, pinpoint on where are the important, I would say, patterns of innovation that we as a community should really look for. Okay, so, and the presentation is going to follow this. It's going to follow this pattern. Okay, so moving forward into the new digital banking landscape, and this is, you know, the questions of the survey here really focused on the impact that the pandemic has brought. Okay, and one main question was about where were the structural changes that happen in your bank, mainly fostered by the pandemic. And of course, it's not surprise that 71% of the banks answered that that one key aspect was ensuring that their workers in remote, something that perhaps they were not accustomed to do, that they would have all of the conditions to make it so, right? So this was a shock to the system, obviously. And obviously it needed a rather rapid adaptation to it. Some banks were much more ready to make it so than others, that is for sure. And it comes no surprise that this was the main answer that came out of this initial question of the survey. Okay, so it's really all about how can I keep functioning as an organization in the realm that I'm not accustomed to. Okay, so this was very important. This meant investing in technologies that either kept the boat afloat, I would say, and also kept the boat secure, right? Which is not just about teams and so forth. It's having secure connections. There's a lot of potential sensitive information that had to be exchanged, and how could you do that in a secure way that would not compromise the overall operation of the institution itself. Okay, so no surprise here. Second, so 58% almost said that is really all about. So if the first, if the first value is really all about the internal liveliness, let's put it like that, the second value is really all about how can still, be here for my customers in a way that perhaps I was not accustomed to do. That meaning that I really needed to be a pure digital interaction with my customers, right? This was a shock, especially for the institutions and for the clients themselves. They were not accustomed to that type of interaction. So a lot of investment and a lot of, I would say, ad hoc innovation, let's call it like that, had to be brought up for the banks and for the credit unions and institutions to keep those channels open and really widen them in terms of approach to their customers. Okay, and definitely as we saw, that is something that will shape and is shaping the current investments from the institutions themselves. On the third level, which is implied, I would say, a little bit on the second, that is 42% of the banks mentioned, the transitioning from paper-based processes that they have into fully digital. Okay, so that is something that, again, it was already happening in the background, or with some more institutions more mature than others, more certainly, and we can also position that from a market point of view, right? So there is a difference between Europe and Americas and in Asia and Africa in that regard, but that definitely the pandemic really forced that, right? So we all know examples of those programs that either in the European landscape and in the US as well were lifelines, especially for the SMEs that were I would say, where the pain was more felt, right? With more strength, from that dynamic of being able to keep the company running while having my workers at home, if that is the case for my business. There were layoffs happening, as we all know, unfortunately. And those programs were, for a lot of these companies, were a lifeline. And some governments did rely on banks to make that process available. And so banks really had to push forward in terms of moving those processes in fully digital, and sometimes in a very orchestrated way, and that's fine. And perhaps in some situations, like some of the conversations that I have shown, that they were more kind of, in a way that we will make it work this way, and then we will improve going forward. So overall, that was, these indicators here from this first part of the survey really pointed into, I think, an overall knowledge that we all felt in some way or the other. Now, on top of that, the second question was really all about the challenges, right? So the previous one was about the structural changes that the pandemic imposed. This was about, through that time, what was the main challenge that I as an institution faced? And the majority and the most answer was designing new processes. Okay, this was challenging, for all the reasons that we mentioned before, right? So given on the maturity of the institution or not, some were more ready to it, some had the right tools, some had the right talent, right? As Renata mentioned, talent is also the key aspect here. But designing these new processes and deploying them in fully digital was definitely something that a lot of institutions, or the majority of institutions, found it to be the main challenge. Applied to that, there was a second aspect, that was the ability not really to serve their customers through this pure digital perspective, right? So this relates to that pain that we saw in the earlier question. So it comes no surprise that the second most chosen answer here was really, my inability as an institution to really serve that. And this, again, for those latecomers into the digital path, I think this really pushed the digital argument forward and really position innovation as a key aspect in terms of budgeting, right? So that is definitely a challenge by itself that has now pushed and hopefully motivated some, more institutions that not really were looking into that they are really considering that and really putting that, not just saying that, putting in their budgets, which is paramount for this to happen. Additionally, impacted here is the fact that we have been having a scenario or a landscape where we have more and more digital transactions happening, perhaps on some institutions that were not as ready as they should be for that bandwidth of requests. Obviously, what also happened, and this was an insight that came out of this question, is cybersecurity, right? So cyber attacks were on the rise and still are in that regard. And this, correlates to the fact that perhaps some of these institutions were not as ready as they perhaps should be for this level of interaction. And something that has now, and as we're going to see later on, has been now shaping the investments priorities for these institutions. A third different perspective here is how has the pandemic really is shaping or changed, if you will, perhaps that is the most relevant question, the roadmap for these institutions from the technology perspective mainly. A significant 80% of the FIs really did without hesitation acknowledge that definitely this experience has changed, has altered their roadmap for the institution, okay? And of course, this will then vary a little bit for each institution, but virtually everyone, acknowledged that this happened. And going to a little breaking down that value, well, we saw that from their perspective, the majority, so almost 56% of the institutions really feel that what they need to focus from that roadmap adaptation is really the functionality of the digital apps. And this, of course, comes to no surprise if we consider the previous insights, right? So if one of the main challenges was really how to interact with my customers digitally and how can I improve that, and given that that is something that is not going to go back in terms of the of overall scope, this comes without too much surprise. So their top priority, and the top priority seems to be now in terms of changing those norm maps, is really focusing on that. On the second level, not too much behind this value with 54%, is the ability to cross-sell and upsell in digital. Okay, so this has been a major shift in roadmaps as well for the institutions. Digitization of front office comes behind with 50%, and then the back office with more or less the same value. Another key aspect seems to be, of course, and we all can appreciate the facility of that now, is the contactless payments. And again, was already here before the pandemic. Definitely the pandemic for a various number of reasons has pushed that forward. So that is also something that banks are really pushing for in terms of budgeting and and shifting their roadmap. Okay, so now going into the second part of our report, and again, this second part, what we call embracing digitization, is really all about how. So one is about what is the current scenario, right? So what is the current landscape? These waves that we're still feeling and are going to feel in the next few years, I would argue, from both technological and economical point of view. Now, how do institutions really position themselves in their current states of this digital transformation journey, okay, with all of this relevance from these waves? So if we look at the first question in this part, and it's really all about what is the current state of your digital path, almost 40% say they are modernizing. And I think from what I also got from the interviews is that mainly means simplifying in digitalization of these processes, right? So it really, for me, it's, I try to sum it up in removing friction. So for better or for worse, these processes, or at least parts of these processes are already there. The channels, more mature or less mature, are already there as well. So it's really all about how can I optimize it in terms of the customer experience. And the main focus seems to be on how can I remove friction from these processes or from these journeys that are already there. Okay, some more, some less digital in that perspective. There is also a key insight here on to this question around what we call the enterprise-wide transformation, right? So taking these approaches on kind of a large front within the institution itself, right? So that seems to be and that was 32, almost 33% of the responses around that topic. So that is mainly, about not only technology, of course, but it's really all about how can I, imprint this innovation approach into my teams? How can I change mindsets? How can I legitimize that process? This was a recurring topic in the interviews, by the way, which I'll dig a little bit deeper as we move on. But this should be definitely appear to be a key aspect here in terms. Curiously enough, there was also a good 27% of the responses pointing in that in their current state of affairs for the digital path, they are also very focused on new business creation, right? So they deem themselves a little bit more mature in that process. And now they are taking advantage of those rails to really expand and perhaps new products or areas of business that they previously did not explore. So that was also interesting. From another insight that we got here from the report is how what are the main channels of communication between these institutions and the clients. And surprise, surprise, phone still appears as one of the top interactions here. That is curious. That is curious in terms of, especially for more tech-savvy institutions and or customers, having the fact that phone still plays a main player here in terms of the channel itself of interacting with the institution is definitely something that the banks and the institution itself should not forget. This channel is here. Mainly, there is also a concern around the cost that is implied to having a customer circulate or jump from various channels until they really get their issue sorted. That also is an important topic for the institutions, and there is a correlation definitely between the number of jumps that a live customer does with live assistant channels and the cost that has for the institution, right? And that goes from a couple of cents to a few euros. So that is very relevant. That is very relevant from a sustainability point of view, from a financial sustainable point of view, in making this digital ecosystem work in the long run. Okay, so in terms of their overall, I would say, positioning themselves in this, let's say, in this graph here that we see that we see a good shift, right, from what we would have been a few years in the past, right? So we see that definitely as we expect, there is still the large chunk of institutions place themselves in the early majority or the pragmatics, right? So they want to innovate, but they're also keeping it safe, and this is the DNA of a financial institution for sure. But we do see 27%-ish of either innovators or the adopters, right? So we're seeing that innovation pushing forward. We're seeing some cultural change within the institutions, and again, that is something that was really came out of the interviews, was about innovation is one part technology, but the great part of it is really all about mindset. And that mindset is a key aspect to really having the agile methodology working and running within these institutions. Seems that the success factor is one of the success factors is for sure the sponsorship at CEO or board level. Okay, so from the direct interviews that we had, that they came out as a constant common denominator for these institutions. Some institutions also mentioned that a mid-level sponsorship also really aided and created a place where teams could really experiment and really go into that kind of a fail fast approach that we see in some of these big software houses and innovators out there. And some of them really pointed in the direction that, okay, this is something that we have been able to implement inside. So failing is not a prohibitive word, and we were able to gain some innovations or gain some interesting aspects out of it. Okay, so that was an interesting forward. So overall, the 30,000 level perspective here is that we're seeing a shift from from the laggards to definitely into the early adopters. So the chasm is really it's beginning to shrink, I would say. Okay, so that is a very interesting perspective as well. From their own maturity, looking inward. So where are the areas that I deem more mature from my serving, from my customers? It's not a shocker that we see that checking and current accounts are the top more mature product that the institutions regard themselves as having. It is interesting to say that, for example, around customer onboarding, around 50 of them pointed into that direction. Okay, but as you can see, apart from checking and deposits, we're talking about 50 or less percent of percentages, right? So there's still, at least from your own eyes perspective, there's still a lot of improvement and maturity that's been obtained and how you can deploy those projects digitally, and underlining here that digital is the aspect. And it's I guess it's really all about dealing with all of the complexities that internally institutions have versus these shockwaves that the pandemic is still pointing. Okay, so moving forward to the third pillar of the report, what we call the humanized digital banking. Of course, this message is very near and dear to my heart and to eBankIT. That we really wanted to explore on. Okay, so we definitely have a good view on the digital landscape. We definitely are now able to position ourselves as we are mature or not in terms of the digital journey. Now, let's go a little bit specific on how can we really, what are the key challenges that we have in terms of making this digital approach much more frictionless and much more human, I would say. Okay, so the first question around in this pillar really was all about to identify the external blockers. Okay, sorry, the internal blockers. Sorry for the mistake. And definitely, and no surprise, that legacy or complexity was the most value that appeared here. Okay, so that was really not something that we, even from my perspective as a banker, this is something that we see every day, right? So it's really all about how can you declutter and reorchestrate the 50,000 applications and so forth that institutions have internally and to externally as well. So removing that, it seems to be the first factor where every institution is looking for, or at least has identified as a key issue here. Curiously, and going back to Renata's observation, the lack of talent seems also to be a key aspect. This answer was around 50%. So really, dealing with a lot of complexity, plus don't having all of the resources that we need to make that happen, seems to be really, a difficult path for the institutions, right? Also, interestingly enough, the lack of budgets for new initiatives was also identified as one of the blockers, right? So there is definitely still a lot that has to be dealt in that, and so especially on bigger institutions, right? So in bigger institutions, and that was highlighted in the interviews, especially when we are talking about multinational operations, that complexity is sometimes exponentially translated into that. And one key insight also came that there is a high level of success when you deploy a certain level of autonomy for a region or for a country, or depending on how the institution is divided. Okay, not only from a market perspective, that is, I would say given, but from a technology perspective, that seems to play a very important role for institutions. And this was mainly an insight that came out of the interviews. From the external perspective, regulations still play, or at least they were identified as the main blocker, for the bank's digital transformation. So this is something that has to be, I would say, dealt with at that level, and that's a challenge, right? Regulations are there, supposedly to guarantee, the at least, to overall, we don't lose, the trust stamp that institutions need to have for this. And if we look, like Renata and Roberto mentioned, if we look at SPV and what happened, right? I think, we need, as institutions, we need to deal with this, but they are there. Perhaps on the long run, they keep the system running in that sense. Low user adoption was also an external. It was deemed as an external factor. So still, the interaction digitally with customers is a key blocker for really revamping, right? So that goes with that argument that I mentioned before about the multi-channel approach and the cost that the customers have for institutions when they start flipping around too many channels out of frustration of not being able to deal with this particular issue or topic. The argument is really all about having a very solid online and mobile solution, so you can mitigate those costs and you can ideally get that value up in terms of user adoption. That's something that also, fortunately, we heard on the interviews that some banks were successful in that regard. Okay, moving forward, another key question here around this pillar was about given this, these blockers, right? Given this scenario, what are the key technologies that institutions need to adopt? And again, no surprise, personalization came on top of that. A data-driven personalization, I might say. Okay, so 65% of the banks pointed into that direction. That means that they are looking into that they are budgeting for that. And we, as a provider, have felt that, which is, I would say, a very positive sign. And as we all know, personalization not only drives customer satisfaction and loyalty, but also, will ultimately aid in that challenge that institutions identified, that was, cross and upsell, right? So as much as I remember that, for example, in the previous Qorus event that we had in Barcelona in last December, we had a very interesting set of examples on where banks were interacting and getting people in and offering them a very personalized content, even without being a customer, so they can then position themselves as financial aids and not just opening a simple account or subscribing to that credit card or whatever that is. It's really all about how can you position yourself as an institution. The second value that popped out here in this question was really customer real-time intelligence. Okay, so real-time client analytics is a key differentiator here for institutions, and this just comes a little bit under this value, so 62%. Okay, so that is also interesting. So that probably should tell banks that having a mobile and online experience is great, but you do need to have that, I would say, approach where you can measure that, you can get insights of your customers without actually meaning, just financial insights, but usage insights and so forth. So you can again best serve that client in that perspective. A little bit under that was also that building the mobile super app is something that banks had deemed also crucial to adopt. So this is 56% of the surveyed answered in that direction. Okay, so definitely personalization, or let's call it the humanizing of this digital experience, is a key aspect, and all the insights point into that direction. So that was, I would say, good to acknowledge here. So now let's move to the final part of the report, of the survey, and this is what we call the digital reinvention. Okay, so this is really about where do I as an institution look next? Where do I really need to focus, and looking at and that's why we had the metaphor of the radar, right? So it's really all about, a set of waves that we need to tackle with different timelines perspectives. Okay, so gaining a little bit more detail is how, the first question was really all around success and innovation, and how do you position yourself as an institution. Okay, so in this, I think, will go very near to the hearts of all of our speakers here, because this is really, I would say, where they focus their day-to-day, right? So as you can see here, depending on the specific angle into the innovation, budgeting or planning or approach to it, we see slightly different levels of self-evaluated success. But overall, what we do see here is, a 50 or plus perspective on being somewhat or at least successful from the institutional perspective. So that tells us that there seems to be a right path, and the other insights have pointed into that direction, right? So there is a very positive outlook in how the organizations are pivoting themselves to really, push forward on this perspective. Like mentioned before by Renata and Roberto, there is a lot of there is still, even with the current economic situation, there is still a lot of investment in funding going into fintech. So that is also a positive sign. Okay, so overall, I would say a very positive outlook here. An interesting, different question was around how can so let's evaluate, right? Given the whole of the internal complexity, the technology legacy or not that the institutions have, how quick are these institutions in turning something into a digital offering, right? And as you can see here, the main timeline seems to be something between 6 months and 2 years, which is still, I would say, long-ish, and if depending, of course, on the whole scale of the idea itself. But through the interviews, there was a recurring topic that the bigger the institution, the more complex, the longer it took. No surprise there, but especially on the multi-country scenario, that seemed to be even more difficult to operate, given that these teams did have or did not have either visibility or autonomy to make it so. Okay, there was also a discussion around, neobanks and their alleged ability to really deploy these types of ideas into a digital offering sooner. Okay, that is mostly identified as being something correlated to the overall internal complexity. Okay, and the legacy technology aspects of it. There is, I would say, an argument around, because they have fewer projects, they can, or fewer features, they can make that happen faster. My argument is not really about what typically these institutions have. They do have less products, I will give that, but they traditionally might have even more features per product than perhaps more traditional institutions. So I think it's also very important to differentiate feature from product. And sometimes in this legacy conversation, that topic gets a little bit, I would say, mixed, if that makes sense, right? So, we had, for example, an institution report that they were thinking that they were going through the process of a particular LIV, and then when they were struggling internally to make that happen and to see the delay of light and what you know, right? So then a smaller institution was able to push a similar idea to the market with success, right? So it's really all about removing that internal friction, and that is, you know, mainly entitled to the application of the innovation mindset and the agile approach to it, which again, the good feedback from the interviews and from the report is the institutions have been going in that path. It's still a lot of work to be done, as we saw in the graph with the chasm before, but definitely there is a pattern here moving forward. So the expectation is really to take advantage of that and consolidate that in the next, I would say, 3 to 5 years, right? So that seems to be a very positive key insight here from the survey. On the next, and really getting into the, I would say, near the radar vision of this, from the institution's perspective, you know, we clearly, you know, directly ask about where are the areas that you see more innovation happening in the next 5 years within your own institution. Okay, so I would say no surprise that fully digitalization of the customer journey is top priority. That is correlated definitely to the other feedback that we saw earlier in the previous sections of the survey, right? So that is, and that of course, you know, correlates directly to the customer expectations that customers have nowadays, you know, to the increased efficiency that is implied with that optimization, the ability to really take that into a data-driven process, right, in making those optimization decisions from the bank itself. And of course, you know, like the neobank argument is really, you know, the competition, right? So the competition is out there, and as we're going to see, they're coming from different places, as you're going to see in the next question. So overall, you know, the digitalization or digitization of this customer journey is where where the eyes, where the budgets, and where banks are really seem to be looking next for the next 5 years. Interestingly enough, if you look at the second result, right? So expanding a digital partner ecosystem, that is very interesting, right? As coming as a second and not far from the first, right? So from the interviews and from the questions that we had, that seems to be being driven by the access to innovation, right? So weekly or ideally having a quick plug and play experience with some of these partners is a great way to foster this path moving forward. The collaboration that you get out of it, that is also key, and the ability to have that as a speedy go-to value, if that makes sense, from that particular angle that institution is looking for. And overall, the richness that comes from having these partners into the mix, you know, overall translates into a better customer experience. That's what the institution is all telling us. And the flexibility, right? The flexibility is, you know, in the argument of plug and play, although plug and play has been the challenge for institutions, that really seems to be, you know, a key argument here. Okay, so as you can see, there are other topics here that we will then explore a little bit more on the report itself. But as you can see here, you know, good, interesting insights from this question. On this path of moving forward, what are the threats, you know, or the non-obvious threats that banks identified? You know, the GAFA argument or the topic seems to be still on everyone's mind. And if we now look, and it's, you know, coincidentally enough, we just had Apple launching their savings account this week, if I'm not mistaken, or the last week, and that has been, you know, creating a lot of noise within, specifically in the US market, where they launched. So, you know, the GAFA threat, although not new, seems to be, at least from the FI's own eyes, seems to be where where main threat is coming from, right? So these players had a lot of data, they have the infrastructure, they have the platforms. So definitely institutions need to consider this as into their ideation process, into the innovation process, when they really look at the competitive landscape. And of course, obviously the institutions that they will rub shoulders with on their current operating markets. Now, we did purposely not, we're going to leave the radar itself in its more, I would say, design mode for the report itself. So please check this data that you're seeing here in a much more interesting perspective when we release the report in May. So take this data as a teaser for the report. And as you can see here, when we asked institutions, where do you see technology moving forward in terms of the impact it's going to have for the financial sector or for the banking industry in particular, in a kind of a 3, 5, 10-year perspective, we see a pattern here of that radar, right? So we see those waves, first and foremost, now let's put 3 years now, and we see a focus on, well, cybersecurity does not come as a surprise, given that we just, what we talked before, and process automation, okay? Digital payments or digital seamless payments, a little bit here down the bottom, also a key aspect here that is being identified by the institutions. The second wave, clearly looking into the AI perspective, as especially now that all of these natural processing languages models are coming to the market, reaching ever more users and getting ever more data, right? So applying this, not only that particular technology of machine learning, but others to improving overall key aspects of the institutions with their customers seems to be a very solid second wave, right? So if the first wave is more pragmatic in terms of, let's get our processes secure and optimized, and let's get, a very modern payment experience to our customers. The second wave is really all about applying AI with, with more or less here certainties here on some specific areas. But my vision is that this is going to really change. It's going to be a game changer for the next 5 years. And curiously enough, pushing forward, right? And pushing forward is really saying we're really not sure, right? Is, other topics that have been, buzzworthy in the market for a few years now, but still there's a lot of uncertainty and really, I would say, a lack of understanding around, these topics. And institutions really push, the cryptos and the metaverse really forward. I would say that's really, a mix between, over lack of understanding overall, from these topics and, adoption from the users. This is still far off, as this indicates. So I would say, let's see how that goes. Like Roberto mentioned in the beginning, the whole idea of this radar is that we keep then evolving and keep updating it. So I'm curious to see how these topics are going to evolve in the next few years. And I would argue that from the AI perspective, it's going to get perhaps a little bit sooner than 5 years, right? I think that's going to get a little acceleration, given that with all of what's happening currently in the market. Okay, and just to wrap up, given all of that, what are the 3 priorities? We asked, what are the 3 priorities for innovation in terms of investment for institutions? So CX, customer experience, top value here. So that is coherent with all of the insights that we saw throughout these pillars. Digital transformation overall for the bank, right? And that is saying a lot. So that is also something that banks are pushing forward. And really redesigning their services in a kind of a digital first approach seems also to be a priority. Underline is also, I would say, not to put that not as a priority, because cybersecurity here, or meaning that keeping those relationships and keeping those interactions safe, fraud proof, and so forth is and will be, I would argue, perhaps this percentage will change a little bit next year. It is a key topic here for institutions. So I hope that you enjoyed here this quick presentation from our side. As we said, the report is going to be released in May. Please reach out to us, to eBankIT, of course, to get it. It's going to get published, so hopefully you will get it. You'll get it. You'll get the notification when we publish it. As you can see, we have, the survey reached more than 200 executive within various types of institutions throughout the world. Okay, so this is a I would say, very interesting perspective. It's really fingering the pulse in terms of where the market is going for, and hope you enjoy and you get value out of this report. It's certainly been a very useful and a very interesting exercise for us here at the ebankIT and for Qorus. As for the ones that don't know, so ebankIT, we as a company, we're really focused in enabling banks and credit unions in building these long and meaningful relationships with institutions, right? So we're all about digital and how can you provide digital in a kind of a seamless, quick, customized way, right? So our whole gambit is really all about how can I balance a product, a platform that speeds my delivery to market without losing customization on top of that, right? So we sit in the middle of the build and buy argument, I would say, and has been very successful for FI partners. So let us know if you have any interest. We're always open to have a fruitful discussion, even if you're not interested or anything particular like that. We're always open to those, to having those discussions. So I hope that this was fruitful, and please look out for the report as it comes out in May. We are now going to what I hope is the most interesting part of this webinar today. That is the roundtable, the lightning talks with the experts that we already presented previously. So the way that we are going to organize this part of the session is we're going to have a round table of questions, which I will fire to our esteemed guests. So I will stop now sharing my screen so we can appreciate the camera and the answers for each one. I'm sorry, I need to stop sharing. And there you go. I should have stopped sharing by now. So I will now invite my distinguished panel of guests to answer, to give, on top of what we just saw, and, building on the interviews that we had previously, give a little insight or their own perspective, which is, what we are looking for here on some of the aspects that we talked about today here, even in the report. So I will perhaps start with Khadija. Okay, if you're okay, Khadija, I will start with you, and I will introduce here the topics around this question. So as we saw, right, the pandemic definitely has this ripple effect within, I would say, virtually everyone, and obviously banking was not spared. How did the pandemic, how these ripples of waves have affected, in this case, KIB?
So, I guess it had its own advantages and disadvantages, and that goes across for everybody, all types of organization, every industry. I think the disadvantages, I could say, have been both emotional and personal for people. But as a bank, I think one of the things that really we struggled with was our finance portfolio. It was decreasing because obviously due to the lockdown, there were no constructions, there's no stocks in market, cars were out of stock. So all of this obviously had impacts in, our lending portfolio. And obviously the other impact was the people were losing their jobs, and that started impacting the payment of finances as well, right? So that was the hindsight of it. I just wanted to get over with that because the advantages of what happened, post the pandemic was a bit, shocking and quite welcoming in terms of the transformation for us, basically. So what really happened was digital transformation as an advantage got the much needed attention and acceleration, not just from banks, but from the regulators as well. Because then the central banks started working on regulations for open banking, for BaaS, for cloud computing. And they even opened a regulatory sandbox to test new concepts. So all of this was not being thought of prior to the pandemic. So apart from just embracing technologies, businesses started making technology a fundamental part of their business strategy. So it was not just the technology teams that were talking about, technology anymore. It was businesses, it was everybody in the bank. Digital adoption, I can say, easily kind of accelerated by 5 years because the government as well had many e-services that they had launched, because Kuwait was going through some really rigid, quarantine rules, because of which it kind of forced all age groups to use more technology, as simple as, shopping and having slots for shopping, or your renewal of your ID, so this kind of actually saw a surge in us in terms of transactions that you mentioned even during your talk, e-payment transactions, your e-commerce transactions. The limit that we were having at the bank before the pandemic actually was not any more suitable post-pandemic. We had to almost double the limits because people were using those transactions. On the other end, because there was not, because there was not enough travel, there was lockdown, there was a lot of cash liquidity. So we realized that, the only way that now we could utilize people's banking needs, or kind of encourage people's banking needs, was loading our digital channels with services that will allow them and facilitate them to bank from home. So we started doing that, whether through our contact center or our apps, even through the website. And that gave us also a good understanding of how our customers were more welcoming of, technology adoption. There were two other things that was really, I could say, quite positive about it. And that was the importance of agile expanded from technology teams to product teams to business teams. And of course, the ways of work as well. We as a banking industry were very limited to working on-premise. After the pandemic, working from home became a normal, and this kind of helped us source even capacity from not just locally, but also globally. So you could have people working not just from the local market, but from across the world. And that kind of also ups your capacity as well, and your capability building within the organization. So I guess the pandemic had a lot of goods, I would say, for KIB.
Thank you, Tisha. That's we can feel that from the distance for sure. Santiago, how do you how did this felt by Great Andorra?
Okay, so for the pandemic in Andorra, you have to understand that Andorra is a very small country with 80,000 inhabitants, and we used to receive before pandemics about 7 million tourists every year. So from one day to the other, everything was absolutely closed, and the country had mostly for the 80% of the PYB was zero. And since we are very small, it was very difficult to have aids from the government. I mean, the aids were very limited, and everybody had to take some actions about it. For us, it was very good for everything related to implementation. I mean, 2 months before the pandemic started, we had put in place in the company Microsoft Teams. Okay, we had planned to have an adoption during 2 years. So our expectations were that maybe 2 years after the implementation, maybe the executives will start asking for Microsoft Teams rooms in order to change their dynamics, etc. That went very well, because in 24 hours, 100% of the company was working from home, and everybody was already formed in Microsoft Teams, not only in the tool, but in the ways to use it. So that was something that we did. We were very lucky there. Afterwards, from the customer experience, there was something very curious that happened. And that is that, everything related to retail in Andorra was not used at all to e-commerce, because everything you sell it in your physical shop. The tourists are coming to Andorra, they are buying in your shop, and the locals are going to the shop also, since everything is very close here. We have 465 square kilometers and 98% is forest. So everybody's very close to each other. All the retail companies that we had to close, but they wanted to operate, and they could not have physical interaction with the customers. So they started to have new kinds of needs that we were serving for a lot of years, but that anybody had a real use case to apply. So we had an explosion in needs related to everything from electronic payments, helping people to find the way to create a site in order to sell their goods and to connect it to our payment platforms, etc. So that was very, very interesting also. And what changed also was a way of communicating with our customers, because we are very used to physical interaction in Andorra. Everybody is very close to each other. And everything related to video calls was something you can't remember. Zoom was thriving there. Nobody was doing video calls before COVID. So we started doing the video calls with the customers, and we realized that this kind of interaction is very efficient for us, because you can go from something that is synchronous and formal to something that is synchronous, informal, and asynchronous, informal also. Everything related to instant messaging. We started thriving there, and that was something that everybody won there. And related to digital signatures of contracts, that is something that we did during the pandemic without caring too much about security. So things that we should be signing with a qualified signature, maybe we were doing it with advanced signatures, but that wasn't the need. And just as Katja said, the whole country was a big sandbox for all this experimentation, because we were in the need of that.
Yeah, that's a very different perspective, right? From the different dynamics within different countries. So that's interesting. So moving forward on that, and I guess Renata, I'm gonna push this one to you. Given that we had, like Santiago said, we had, definitely different institutions had different roadmaps in terms of their adoption of this on that technology, and the pandemic really pushed that forward, right? So I would say that Santiago never see that Teams adoption if it was not for the pandemic, right? How do you see that versus the overall your own vision for Bradesco in terms of where you position yourself right now versus how you can cross that chasm that we saw there in the slide in terms of the innovators versus the laggers?
Yeah, I think, Pedro, so first of all, very similar impact over here regarding the COVID and what it did to employees and businesses. So very, very similar impact. In terms of where we see ourselves today, the corporate strategy here at Bradesco involves 4 pillars. One is customer and customer experience, first of all, people and talent, sustainability, and the 4th pillar is digital transformation. So in terms of digital transformation, we do see ourselves of early adopters in terms of digital transformation. And for us, I think the way we see this, you mentioned that, I mentioned that at the beginning, digital transformation, it's not about digital or is about technology. It's much more about people, talent, organization structure, culture, and of course, leadership. So what we did is we focused a lot on reorganization here to evolve with digital transformation. We did completely reorganize the way we do business and the way we develop products. Our approach was to reorganize from front to back. So really looking at customer needs first, and then back to where we're going to develop products and services. And of course, with this customer mindset focused on agile methods to implement product development and feature development, and with the application of modular technology. So we reorganized the whole bank into business domains built around customer needs. So these domains were loans and financing, one, investments and savings, transactions, international and exchange, relationship, insurance, and so on. So today, 80% of all software development is organized into what we call villages, which is a group of people, group of squads to develop journeys and to develop products and services. We have currently 25 of those villages with 600 squads and around 4,000 people involved in that. So that is a major shift in terms of organization and in terms of how we are evolving our digital transformation and efficiency as well. So I think that sums up a little bit of where we're looking at and how we are trying to cross that chasm that you showed in the chart.
Thank you. That's that agile approach definitely is a common denominator that came out in the interview. So, and from your experience, Massimo, what do you have learned in terms of this? What the best approaches for this crossing?
Well, we learned that one of the key success factors is to have in a small team all the competence that is needed to work on the topics. Usually in small teams, you have more flexibility, you have the agility, and it is important also to have to give to those teams the freedom to take some decisions. And I experienced in the projects I had also with eBankIT that having a small team on the eBankIT side and a small team on the bank side that is working on the requirements as one team was the most effective way to have a common understanding of the requirements. Often in these projects, the priorities change due to what happens on the market, what are the needs of the customer. One example on our side, when the pandemic started, at that time, we had already implemented a messenger solution in the e-banking and mobile banking. So the customers at that time were able to communicate with the bank and the other way around in a way like WhatsApp or other chat apps. And during the pandemic, we realized that we had to push such functionality more and more, and so we continued working on that on topics like video chat and chatbot and One other key success factor is also having the ability to provide APIs. I think if it is a legacy system or it is a modern system, at the end, you need, as a bank, the mindset that you need open APIs that you can provide. You need this openness, and you need also to be pragmatic and have inside the bank people that, from the regulatory view, have also this openness.
That's great, Masman. Thank you for that. So and building on that, and I guess I'm gonna ask you, Khadija, this next one. Where do you see now, right? So we had this, these waves. Where is KIB looking for next in terms of where are priorities for innovation and investment? One, and I guess second is, where do you have felt that these innovation efforts had more impact previously?
Look, I mean, if it's about prioritization of innovation, right? And we were given a choice, it would be technology, 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 digital transformation. This is what it is all about. But, it's not just about, having technology of any kind. It's about understanding where to put that technology in play that kind of solves problem for customers and also kind of brings in the kind of revenue that the bank is looking for. For example, we have some underserved segments in Kuwait, like the SMEs. We have like the blue-collar workers, haven't been looked at for a while. There's a large need for some products like BNPL, still microcredits, SME credits. All of these are still pockets to be explored. So if we looked at priorities and technology, this is where, the money would be going. Apart from that, if it was not just technology, like Renata was also mentioning, digital transformation is not all about technology. It's also about investment in human capital, upskilling, the staff, the people, the employees to this new approach to banking. And of course, cost is something that at the end of the day should be, managed efficiently. So improving efficiency is something that we also kind of look for with proper, say, business process reengineering, lean, all of that, right? Now, in terms of where really is the customers or the focus, what we've seen, obviously, and, Pedro, you've seen this, right, over the years, we've seen the surge in our usage of our mobile app by 25 to 30%. The year of 2020, we had a surge of 40%, and that was obviously, geared by the pandemic. After that, it has maintained at around 25 to 30 easily. So digital adoption in Kuwait has not really been a problem, but I think it's about what value we are bringing in to the customers and how, which really matters. Now, an interesting other thing is, as much as people have been talking about digital, the physical ecosystem is still very existing in Kuwait. So, and this physical is only due to the sense of security that people feel, that, yeah, this is, the banks exist, our money is safe. This is what's going in the minds of customers. And that's why, if you look at some of the reports as well, right? Even after the fintech boom and, you have the neobanks and so many other players that are coming into the financial services, right? You still have banks on the #1 position for security and for, the feeling of trust and confidence. This is what banks need to optimize on or use on. And that's what we are trying to do. I don't think any bank now has an option to not collaborate with a fintech or with, going with the new advanced technology. But what we also need to be aware of is this sense of security that people are looking for needs to be managed. And in order to do that, our digital transformation has been a mix. It's been phygital. So it's a mix of physical and digital both. And what we're trying to do is we are strongly pushing digital for operations. And the branch network, first we use that as a brand anchor, of course, and then also as a financial advisory, both for our individual and our corporate clients. And obviously we are having the understanding today that the existing branch format needs to be, evolved from the standard structure that's existing, and it has to be kind of merged into this digital ecosystem, because of which what we are also doing is we are trying to rebrand and redesign our branch networks in a way that it replicates this digital ecosystem where you have zones that can be fully serviced, semi-serviced, and then, self-serviced as well. So the customer gets a sense of that digital ecosystem merging into the physical ecosystem, and that's kind of giving them a best of both worlds.
That's great. Thank you, Khadija. On top of that, where do you see, for you, Santiago, and for Caetano, the top 3 priorities for that innovation investment and roadmap going forward?
We are focusing on internal digitization, and that's something related to talent that we can discuss afterwards. Something very interesting that we are seeing. So digitization of our internal processes for us is key in order to provide new digital services also. Because just as Massimo said before, appification is something very important in order to provide services, but it's not only from the technical side, but also from the servicing side. The objective there is not only to provide technical possibilities to our customers, but to provide the same services that we are giving to ourselves in order to run the bank, to be able to provide these services to our customers, such as SMEs and fintechs. So I always say, let us do the boring work and do the fun work for yourselves, because that's what we've been doing since the regulation started to go up. And that's number one. Then we are also focusing in differentiation in services, in payments. So we have just today released our instant payment service. So payments is important for us, since we are a country that is receiving so many tourists, and we are focusing also on differentiation in investments and wealth, and that's something that we are doing even in internal innovation, and also with collaboration and venture building, and everything wrapped up with a lot of training and learning to our customers. So we want to provide, just as Khadija said, that we are providing trust as banks. We not only want to provide trust from the operational point of view, but also from the knowledge point of view. And that's something that we are focusing a lot right now.
Thank you, Santiago. So that's great. So on top of that, and I think I'm looking at you, Renata. Where do you think that, and given this panorama of the radar that we discussed to the insights of the report, where do you see and I'm always a little bit biased on this term, but the game-changing aspects of technologies that will trail the way for the next 5 to 10 years for banking? Where is your vision for that?
Yeah, I fully agree on everything that was said here regarding digital and the need for trust and to be present in both ways. I reiterate that as very, very much of what my beliefs. In terms of game-changing technology, if we can call it that way. Of course, I think we've seen and we believe that AI is still a game changer. And in the short term, with emphasis on adaptive AI and generative AI, like we've all seen, but we still believe this is for us a way to really gather data and be intelligent in terms of data from many sources, be able to personalize offers, be able to get most out of ecosystems and partnerships. So yes, for us, this AI is a big one. The second one that we are really keen on is to evolve and implement blockchain and distributed ledger technologies, which will change the infrastructure underneath the financial services. So everything that is coming in the token economy, digital assets, decentralized finance, and also the central bank digital currencies will have to run on these kind of technologies. So we are really investing on preparing the bank with this kind of infrastructure and experimenting on new partners to provide that kind of infrastructure to us. And of course, cloud is also a big one, as a big enabler for scaling our products and services and to give us the flexibility that we need. And I think lastly, and that one is still on a scenario of implementation from 5 to 10 years, we are starting to experiment with quantum computing because we believe it has the potential to expand our ability to really solve many problems that are now considered not solvable because of complexity of data and complexity of scale. That one is still, the value is still to be proven in the next decade, but we are starting with that as well.
Okay, hi Pedro and Renata. I think we have reached the time limit of the webinar. I think if you want, we can go to the final remarks and the conclusions. I can give you my own perspective of what I've heard also from you right now and what I got from the research. I think I've been working in this industry for many years, and this is really the first time I really see this industry really moving on. It is digitization has been in the agenda for many years right now, and that has been always a little bit difficult to make it really happening. I think now, as you're saying, it's happening. It's happening, and from the research and from what you're saying, there are clear signals of that. Is the fact that, for instance, banks are working into change processes, not to change products. And if you want to change processes, that is much more pervasive than just changing a little product here and there or making an upgrade or something. So changing processes moves the needle up. The second thing is, as you were saying, is it's moving so up that it's going to upper level, which is going to corporate innovation. So it's no longer innovation belonging to a single business unit or to a single business line or to a single function. It's really getting into the board. It's really getting into the strategy of the financial institution. So it's at a higher level now. The innovation agenda, it's definitely a digitization agenda. They are now everywhere at a higher level. And this is also what we saw from the research, what you mentioned, is that this is also proven by the fact there is at least 1/3 of respondents who said, digitization is not just about changing processes or whatever, improving what we do, but is actually also about creating new business lines. This is also what you're doing in Bradesco, and creating new business revenues, new opportunity, new streams. So it's new business. And when it goes to new business, again, it's more important, it's more relevant, it gets more into, it gets more attention, and gets more prioritization. So I think those are the signals. The very last one, it's what struck me, is that everybody basically said, well, GAFA are a threat. I mean, I remember researches 4 or 5 years ago where the numbers were very different, because I mean, we all know that Apple got basically the credit cards and the payment cards of most of the world, the Western world at least, and they weren't really considered enemies. And today, maybe, I mean, today, I think they're realizing, I mean, innovation people and managers, people who responded to our survey, they're realizing that we've got to be careful. I mean, the industry gets to be careful when you think about what Apple can do, what Facebook or what Amazon can do. They are a threat, and it's definitely very good to consider what also was said in the panel, that there are so many projects now going also with fintech, I mean, open banking and external technological suppliers, which probably didn't exist for just a few years ago. So I think a lot of it is moving, not at the speed probably of what the fintech startuppers were dreaming 10 years ago, but it's happening. I think now the industry is happening, and that's really the takeaway from my side.
Yeah, that's a way to put it, Roberto. And thank you all. I know that we are a few minutes already over, and but you know, I really would like to, if everyone can, and then I can understand if not everyone can stay on, I would just like to extend a little bit more, because I think the conversation is really interesting, and I would just like to fire 1 or 2 questions. And I know that Massimo has his hand up, and I really wanted to push another question through you, Massimo, if you can accommodate that. I wanted
just to add one point to the comment of Roberto. I think what the banks also need to do is to think about, due to the disruptions to technology innovation and new players on the market, they have to think about new business model. Means that a bank that acts today in a specific area in 10 years might be completely different. A classical bank today can be maybe tomorrow a provider of banking as a service, or the other way around. A bank that today has everything is just a front bank providing advisory to the customer. And I think it's not only about the technology. I think technology is important, but it's not enough if you have the technology in-house, but you don't have the mindset to go the next step for new business models.
Yes, and there is an inherent consolidation of the market in that sense, right? If you know, I looked at this KPI from, for example, from the US market, where you know, around half of the banks that exist right now in the US, and they are about 5,000, 4,000 something in the US alone. 50% of them will disappear in the next 20 years, right? So there's a lot of consolidation made. You know, there is that saying, you know, you will get disrupted, right? Might as well be by yourself, right? And to that regard, Massimo, I did want to push this question through you. And again, I appreciate we're already 10 minutes over, and hopefully the folks can appreciate, you know, our extension here. Is your views on, you know, what is coming next? Where are those waves, from your experience, from your perspective, that are coming, that are going to actually change, you know, the panorama for financial institutions?
What we see at the moment, I mean, this was already mentioned today, embedded finance, Apple that is acting with savings account. I think such topics will happen more and more. In some countries, this will be done by big players like the big 4 technology companies, but also other players. I think at the end, the customer might be interested in going for a solution where the provider gives him trust and the convenience he needs. And I think that's important. The challenge today, managing as a bank, the complexity of the more system, higher volume of transactions, of data. And on the other hand, what we cannot forget is also this security cyber attacks. These are increasing dramatically. And on one hand, we want to provide APIs, and on the other hand, we have to close all the doors. So it's really a challenge to find or stay on a level of security that is able in future.
So it's all about that balance, right? Thank you again. You know, I don't want to push too much your patience with us. I could keep on going, you know, for long now, for a while now from my side. So I'll thank you again for all the attendees and for the speakers here. I would just like to give a final word for each speaker so they can chime in. Thank you again, and we see, you know, we look forward for the next event. So please, Khatija, if you want to go first.
Sure, I think everyone's speaking about technology, digital, all of it. At the end of it, we're all faced by one challenge, and that is customer behavior has changed. It has changed because of a lot of reasons, whether it's the pandemic, whether it's the technology, whether what's happening in terms of the, you know, globally, whatever is happening. So I guess it's all about value, value, and value. Value to customers, value to business, value to stakeholders, value to employees. So whatever transformation that we are doing, whether it's digital, whether it's operational excellence, whether it's all end-to-end, it has to take into consideration that there's value for every entity that's involved in it. And that's what's going to actually keep that transformation valid, relevant, and make a difference.
Thank you. Renata?
Yeah, I totally agree. Customer is king. I guess I just add to what everyone else has said that I think the companies that will thrive, the companies that will sustain its values are companies that are completely data driven, and companies that treat data as a business, not processing data for business, which we mostly do. So those are the biggest threats, independent if they are big techs or new challenger banks or whatever, companies that had a real data for business, then these are the ones that are going to win the war. And really, I think the scenario that we're facing are also is very challenging in terms of regulation and new technology. So those three, and customer expectations. So those four pillars together are making us really have to rethink the traditional banking model. And the sources of revenues that we all had before are not valid anymore. So these makes us rethink the whole thing. And I think incumbents have been surviving all these years, and this is the real process that we're going through right now, reinventing ourselves to be still in the game. So I believe we can do it, and that's why we're here. And well, I thank you all for this wonderful panel and discussion. It was very entertaining and productive, at least for me. I hope it was good for all of you as well.
Thank you, Renata. Very positive outlook. Santiago, you want to pick up?
Yeah, there was something I wanted to say about talent in the company, and maybe it's not something to do a close-up, but a very specific reflection. That's something that that we've been seeing for some years right now, and that's that any new or every new employee that we have that is young and is coming to the company, whatever the place he or her comes, has an ability that none of us had when we started, and that's the ability to code. All young people that come to the company know to code the same way that we knew how to do Excels and write in Word. We are considering very seriously how in a company that is so regulated as a bank, we can use this knowledge from these new employees. And that's where the concept of citizen developer comes. So that is something in digitalization that we are working on. And that's the ability to provide to our employees the ability to build their own tools, but without compromising the security of the bank. So that's another way to give a use to these internal APIs and everything related to how to access your core banking system. And that's something that we consider very interesting, and we are looking forward to work this year. And just to say that the panel was absolutely wonderful, and I have learned a lot of my colleagues. Thank you very much to everybody.
Thank you. Last but not least, Massimo.
I just add a few words. I think what my colleagues said are all very relevant points. At the end, in my eyes, we have to try to recognize what are the potentials in the company or in the bank, and use the full potential. So the potential that is lying around, and also develop new areas of potential, because we cannot live for 5, 10, 20 years on the same stuff we have used in the last years. So everybody has to think about what can I provide in 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, and how can I reach that? So sometimes we realize we are not able anymore in one area to be the king, but together with some partners, we can be the king on the market. And working on that could be a way of being part of, not only more the solution, but part of the solution. And this can bring the same or even more revenue than before.
That's a great way to end. So thank you again for all the speakers and for who attended. You know, my only regret is we cannot go on more, because this is such an interesting conversation. Thank you again from the eBankIT side, from the Qorus side. Thank you all for participating and also involved in the organization. Thank you so much, and we'll look forward to see you on the next one. And watch out for the report that's coming out in May. It's going to have these insights and many more. So please contact us and or Qorus to get your copy. So thank you again, and I bid you farewell.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Nice
Thank you.
experience. Thank you.
Bye.